Hello everyone, and welcome to my Beyond the Gates official channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Tracy decides to expose Vernon and Sharon's secret affair detonates like a carefully planted bomb that has been ticking beneath Fairmont Crest for months, and when it finally explodes, it leaves no relationship, reputation, or illusion unscathed, because Tracy, long dismissed as impulsive, emotional, and unreliable, steps into her power in a way no one anticipates, transforming from wounded bystander to ruthless truth-teller as she uncovers, confirms, and ultimately exposes the illicit affair between Vernon and Sharon, a betrayal so deep and multi-layered that it threatens to dismantle not only a marriage, but an entire legacy built on appearances, loyalty, and social dominance. The story begins quietly, almost deceptively so, with Tracy sensing that something is wrong long before she has proof, because Beyond the Gates has always understood that intuition is often the first whisper of truth. And Tracy's unease manifests in small moments: Vernon's sudden defensiveness, Sharon's calculated warmth, the way conversations abruptly stop when she enters a room, the way Sharon avoids eye contact while simultaneously overcompensating with false concern, and these details, subtle yet persistent, gnaw at Tracy's spirit until suspicion becomes obsession, pushing her to connect as others are too afraid or too loyal to even notice. And while Vernon continues to play the role of the devoted partner, respected patriarch, and moral compass of Fairmont Crest, his carefully curated image begins to fracture under the weight of his own duplicity, because behind closed doors, away from judgmental eyes and whispering elites, Vernon has been entangled in a secret affair with Sharon, an affair not born of fleeting temptation but sustained through deliberate choices, calculated lies, and a shared understanding that their union must remain hidden at all costs, making the betrayal all the more devastating when it comes to light. Sharon, for her part, is no innocent victim of circumstance, as Beyond the Gates paints her with the complexity it reserves for its most dangerous characters. Ambitious yet insecure, affectionate yet manipulative, she convinces herself that what she and Vernon share is not an affair but a destiny cruelly delayed, rationalizing every stolen moment as proof that they were meant to be together, even as she smiles at Tracy, offers hollow reassurances, and pretends to be a confidant while actively destroying her life from the shadows. And this duplicity fuels Tracy's eventual resolve, because when Tracy finally uncovers the truth, through a convergence of intercepted messages, overheard conversations, and one devastating visual confirmation that leaves no room for denial, she is confronted not only with the reality of Vernon's infidelity, but with the realization that everyone around her has underestimated her capacity to act, to think strategically, and to strike back, and rather than collapsing under the weight of betrayal, Tracy does something far more dangerous. She plans. The brilliance of this storyline lies in its pacing, because Beyond the Gates refuses to rush Tracy's transformation, allowing viewers to sit with her pain as it evolves into clarity, resolve, and ultimately controlled fury. And as Tracy processes the truth, she recognizes that exposing the affair is not simply about revenge. It is about reclaiming her narrative in a world that has repeatedly dismissed her as expendable, emotional collateral in the power games of richer, more respected players. And so she waits, watching Vernon and Sharon continue their charade, noting how Vernon doubles down on his lies while Sharon grows increasingly reckless, emboldened by the belief that Tracy is too broken or too naive to ever challenge them. And it is this arrogance that becomes their undoing, because Tracy understands that the truth alone is not enough. It must be revealed at the right moment, in the right way, to inflict maximum impact, and thus she orchestrates her exposure with surgical precision, choosing a public setting steeped in symbolism, a gathering meant to celebrate unity, loyalty, and tradition, where Fairmont Crest's elite congregate to reaffirm the values they pretend to uphold. And it is here, under glittering lights and polite applause, that Tracy finally speaks the words that shatter the illusion. "He cheated on you." A simple sentence loaded with devastation, accusation, and undeniable finality. And the moment hangs in the air like a held breath, as shock ripples through the room and every eye turns to Vernon, whose carefully composed demeanor falters for the first time, while Sharon's face betrays her in ways words never could, revealing guilt, fear, and the sudden realization that the game is over. The aftermath is immediate and merciless, as relationships fracture in real time and alliances are forced into the open, because Vernon's betrayal is not isolated. It implicates everyone who benefited from his silence, who looked the other way, or who helped him maintain the lie, and as accusations fly and loyalties are tested, Beyond the Gates explores the devastating ripple effects of infidelity when it intersects with power, reputation, and generational expectation, showing how one affair can unravel years of carefully constructed stability. Tracy, standing at the epicenter of the chaos she has unleashed, is no longer the broken woman viewers first met, but a figure of quiet strength. Her voice steady, her eyes clear, as she refuses to be gaslit, minimized, or silenced any longer. And while some characters attempt to paint her as vindictive or unstable, classic tactics used to discredit women who expose uncomfortable truths, the narrative makes it clear that Tracy's actions are neither impulsive nor cruel but necessary, because secrets thrive in silence, and her decision to speak forces Fairmont Crest to confront its hypocrisy head-on. Vernon, stripped of his moral authority, struggles to justify his actions, offering half apologies and self-serving explanations that only deepen the damage, while Sharon, exposed and cornered, oscillates between remorse and defiance, revealing just how deeply she believed in the fantasy she helped create. And as the fallout continues, Beyond the Gates resists the temptation to offer easy resolutions, instead allowing the consequences to linger, as trust proves impossible to rebuild overnight and the emotional wreckage spreads outward, affecting children, friendships, and business alliances that were never meant to be. Collateral damage. Yet this is precisely what elevates the storyline from mere scandal to powerful drama, because it refuses to romanticize betrayal or vilify truth-telling, choosing instead to explore the complex emotional terrain that follows exposure, including guilt, shame, liberation, and the painful clarity that comes when lies are finally dragged into the light. And in the end, Tracy's choice to expose Vernon and Sharon's affair becomes one of the most defining moments in Beyond the Gates, not because it ends the story, but because it irrevocably changes the balance of power within it, signaling a new era where silence is no longer guaranteed, where women like Tracy are no longer content to suffer quietly, and where the cost of deception is finally paid in full, making "he cheated on you" not just a line of dialogue, but a thematic declaration that reverberates through Fairmont Crest, reminding viewers that truth, once spoken, cannot be undone, and that sometimes the most devastating act is simply refusing to protect the lies of those who never protected you. The story does not end with the exposure. It mutates, deepens, and darkens, because in Beyond the Gates, truth is never a clean ending but the beginning of a far more brutal reckoning. And once Tracy's words slice through the room and the affair between Vernon and Sharon is no longer a whispered suspicion but a confirmed reality, Fairmont Crest enters a state of emotional freefall where every character is forced to confront not only Vernon's betrayal but their own complicity in sustaining a culture that rewards silence and punishes honesty. And in the immediate aftermath of Tracy's revelation, the power dynamics shift so violently that even the most entrenched alliances begin to crumble, as people scramble to distance themselves from the scandal while quietly calculating how much they knew and how much blame might eventually land on them. And Vernon, once untouchable, once revered as a man of principle, finds himself isolated in a way he never anticipated, because the same respect that once shielded him now amplifies his disgrace, turning every former compliment into an accusation and every past moral stance into evidence of hypocrisy. And as he attempts damage control, offering carefully worded apologies that avoid full accountability, viewers see the terrifying fragility of male authority when it is built on image rather than integrity, while Sharon's unraveling takes a different, more volatile shape as she lashes out in moments of private fury and public composure, oscillating between portraying herself as a victim of circumstance and a woman who simply followed her heart, unable, or unwilling, to grasp that her choices actively dismantled another woman's life. And this psychological dissonance makes Sharon increasingly unpredictable as she begins to blame Tracy for how the truth came out rather than confronting the fact that the truth existed at all, a classic Beyond the Gates maneuver that exposes how often society vilifies the messenger to preserve its comfort with the lie. Meanwhile, Tracy's journey enters its most complicated phase, because while exposure grants her clarity and control, it does not spare her from emotional fallout, as she is forced to endure whispers, side eyes, and the subtle cruelty of those who believe that a woman who exposes infidelity must somehow be bitter, unstable, or unable to let go. And yet Tracy stands firm, refusing to shrink under scrutiny, refusing to apologize for refusing to be betrayed in silence. And the show smartly allows her strength to coexist with vulnerability, showing her private moments of grief, anger, and exhaustion, reminding viewers that empowerment does not erase pain but gives it purpose. And as the days following the exposure stretch on, the ripple effects become increasingly devastating as relationships once thought unbreakable reveal hairline fractures that widen under pressure. Because Vernon's affair was not just a personal failing, it was a betrayal that intersected with business interests, family loyalty, and long-standing rivalries, forcing characters to choose sides in ways that permanently alter the social landscape of Fairmont Crest. And nowhere is this more evident than in the reactions of those closest to the scandal, who must reconcile the man they loved or admired with the man now exposed, grappling with cognitive dissonance that manifests as denial, anger, and misplaced blame, all while Tracy becomes an unwilling symbol of disruption, the woman who blew everything up simply by telling the truth. And as tensions escalate, Beyond the Gates leans into its signature slow burn intensity, layering confrontations that crackle with subtext. As Vernon attempts to regain control by rewriting the narrative, Sharon grows increasingly desperate to justify her actions, and Tracy, no longer reactive, becomes strategic, choosing when to speak, when to remain silent, and when to let others expose themselves through their own lies. And it is this evolution that cements Tracy as one of the show's most compelling figures, because she is not driven by chaos but by clarity, and her refusal to back down forces everyone else to confront uncomfortable realities they would rather ignore, including the fact that betrayal is rarely a solitary act but a network of choices enabled by privilege, secrecy, and entitlement. As the storyline progresses, the emotional stakes intensify rather than dissipate, culminating in moments where characters are forced to face the consequences of their denial, whether through fractured family bonds, professional disgrace, or the slow, suffocating realization that trust, once broken, cannot be negotiated back into existence. And in its most powerful moments, the arc interrogates the cost of maintaining appearances at the expense of truth, asking viewers to consider how many lies are tolerated simply because the truth would be inconvenient. And through Tracy's unflinching resolve, Beyond the Gates delivers one of its most resonant themes yet. That exposure is not an act of cruelty, but of liberation, not just for the betrayed, but for a community poisoned by secrecy. And by the time the dust begins to settle, if it ever truly does, it becomes clear that Fairmont Crest will never return to what it was before Tracy spoke those 3 devastating words, because something fundamental has shifted, a reckoning has begun, and the gates that once kept secrets safely locked have been forced open, allowing light, chaos, and consequence to flood in, ensuring that the legacy of "he cheated on you" will echo through future storylines as a defining moment when silence lost its power and truth finally took center stage. And even as Fairmont Crest attempts to steady itself in the wake of Tracy's revelation, the truth continues to behave like a living force, restless, corrosive, and impossible to contain, because Beyond the Gates understands that exposure does not conclude a betrayal, it activates it, unleashing long-suppressed resentments and buried truths that had been quietly orbiting Vernon and Sharon's affair long before Tracy ever spoke. And as the community fractures into camps of loyalty and denial, the emotional violence becomes more insidious, less explosive but far more enduring, as people begin rewriting their own memories to protect themselves, insisting they never trusted Vernon, or that Sharon always seemed off, while privately reckoning with the guilt of having ignored warning signs when silence was more convenient than confrontation. And this collective revisionism only sharpens Tracy's isolation, because while she is publicly acknowledged as brave, privately she becomes a reminder of everyone else's cowardice, a mirror they would rather avoid. And yet Tracy refuses to disappear into the background as the woman who caused a scandal. She insists on being seen as the woman who survived it, reclaiming her voice not just in moments of confrontation but in quiet, deliberate choices that signal she will no longer orbit Vernon's shadow or seek validation from a society that thrives on selective morality. Vernon, meanwhile, spirals in a subtler but more dangerous way, as his loss of control manifests not in explosive rage but in a desperate need to restore order, attempting to manipulate outcomes behind the scenes, leveraging old favors and institutional power to soften the fallout, and in doing so, he reveals the very entitlement that allowed the affair to exist in the first place, the belief that his actions, no matter how harmful, could always be managed, reframed, or forgiven. Yet Beyond the Gates is ruthless in stripping him of this illusion, showing that the respect he once commanded now functions as a magnifying glass for his failure, making every attempt at redemption feel premature, hollow, and self-serving. Sharon's trajectory grows even more volatile as she finds herself stripped not only of secrecy but of identity, having defined herself for so long through the stolen intimacy she shared with Vernon that once it is exposed, she is left unmoored, oscillating between grand declarations of love and bitter accusations that Tracy ruined everything, unable to comprehend that the affair was already rotten at its core. And as her desperation escalates, Sharon becomes increasingly isolated, her social currency evaporating as allies quietly distance themselves, proving that in Fairmont Crest, scandal is tolerated only as long as it remains discreet, and once exposed, it becomes a contagion no one wants to be associated with. Through it all, Tracy's arc deepens into something far more profound than revenge or vindication, as she begins to grapple with the aftermath of truth-telling, the loneliness, the doubt, the unexpected grief for the future she thought she had, and the show allows her moments of softness without diminishing her strength, portraying her healing as nonlinear, messy, and deeply human. And it is in these quieter scenes that Beyond the Gates delivers some of its most powerful commentary, reminding viewers that choosing honesty does not guarantee comfort or applause, only self-respect. And as Tracy navigates a world that now sees her differently, she begins to forge new alliances rooted not in obligation but in authenticity, subtly shifting the emotional center of Fairmont Crest away from its old power structures and towards something more fragile, yet more honest. The long-term consequences of the exposure continue to unfold like aftershocks as children question their parents, business partners reassess their loyalties, and long-standing feuds resurface with renewed intensity because Vernon's affair becomes a catalyst for broader reckonings, prompting characters to confront their own compromises and the lies they have normalized in the name of stability. And this is where Beyond the Gates truly excels, using a single act of infidelity to interrogate the systems that protect abusers of trust while vilifying those who disrupt the status quo. And as future storylines build upon the wreckage left behind, it becomes clear that Tracy's decision did more than expose an affair. It exposed a culture, one that prized reputation over integrity and comfort over accountability, and by refusing to remain silent,